I like how AEW is doing this. I know we've criticized the booking or at least the storytelling in this company for a while. And I like that there's slings and arrows in every direction at MJF because what's the focus? The focus for any company should be the World Heavyweight Championship. This is tried and true. It's old as the hills. Who's going to be the champion? Because whoever is the champion makes the most money. That's what the story they used to tell.
Yep.
When I was a kid, that's what I'd read about in the magazines. Wow. If there's a heavyweight champion, that means that he makes the most money of anybody in the company. That means he gets more acclaim. Actually, not true, but it's a great story, right?
It's a great story to tell.
I mean, I think that's pretty funny. Like, that's the case. But that's been the story. And I like how all these guys, from Wardlow to Samoa Joe to Jay White and others, are pointing at an opportunity to go at MJF for the championship because that actually should be the centerpiece of the company. Not comedy, not the ha-ha, but the champion. Okay. So, for me, ranking the contenders, I base it on the story. And I think that what we laid out here is the story. Jay White and his group are more relevant than almost anybody in this company right now. I mean, you may not, I know that we were down on the Bullet Club Gold at the beginning because what is it? You got the Guns in there too because they're not very good, but all of a sudden they're elevated where it's like, I can't wait to see them now because when all four of them are together on Collision, it's a must watch. It's one of the most watchable things on Collision when you see those four together because they got the best promo time, they wrestle hard, and so they're interesting. So to me, even though we're going to see this at the Forum in Inglewood coming up later on this month, Jay White is the number one contender for me, followed by Samoa Joe. Joe just keeps putting his beak in there, doesn't it?
Yep.
Just when MJF, you think he's got a promo alone or if he's going through some turmoil, here's Samoa Joe. Hey, what about me? Hey, I think you might need me. Hey, what about me? You know you can't trust Samoa Joe. Followed by Wardlow. I hope for Wardlow's sake, all this time he's getting on TV, all these squash matches that he's getting will lead to something, like a heavyweight championship run at some point. Because even though we see him for a snapshot on TV and wrestling, when we see him for a snapshot on a promo, Gabe, it's more interesting than Wardlow's ever been. So yeah. I think it's in those three. I think if we line them up, I think it's those three in a row.
Wardlow is super interesting to me because he's somehow now the heel just because he's opposite of MJF. Even though when you look at, he wants revenge on MJF because of all the things hey, wait a minute. I beat you. I squashed you. How are you getting all these opportunities ahead of me? He's got legitimate points, and yet somehow he's the heel because MJF has become the babyface. But to me, I feel Jay White has reached that level of the guy, the heel that you're just talking about. Him walking out there and calling it the Bang Bang belt every week. It's just oh man, I can't wait till MJF gets his hands on Jay White and he can get his belt back. And I think that's what they're building towards with Full Gear. And with the addition of another pay-per-view right before the year ends for AEW allows the MJF storyline to continue to there. Because again, we don't know if he signed a contract extension. Is there going to be a bidding war of 2024? So I think Jay White's actually the least, just because I think that Jay White is not going to win at Full Gear. Samoa Joe relinquishing his ROH World Television Championship last night, I think is pretty significant. Because he's walked around with that thing forever. And he's hey, you know what? This thing's holding me back because I want to be world champion, and I'm not going to be able to do it if I've got this. So I think Samoa Joe's the most because after Jay White and MJF, who's been on television more in the last month for AEW than Samoa Joe? Yeah. Joe is defending that title while also being involved in the MJF storyline. So he's been kind of burning the candle at both ends. Whereas right now, Wardlow's still mostly vignettes, mostly squash matches. I think there's still more build that has to happen there. So I would rank them Samoa Joe, Wardlow, and then Jay White, just because I don't think White is going to win at Full Gear.